March 16th, 1903. Just after midnight. The wind howls across the Chihuahuan Desert, rattling the wooden walls of the Jersey Lilly saloon in Langtry, Texas. A kerosene lantern swings from a nail above the bar, casting shifting shadows across wanted posters, whiskey bottles, and a wooden judge's bench that has seen more poker games than trials. Behind the bar sits an old man, Roy Bean, 78 years old, white beard stained yellow with tobacco, eyes rheumy but still sharp, a revolver within arm's reach, as always. He's alone. The saloon is closed. The railroad workers who usually fill the place are sleeping in their camps down the tracks. Outside, a desert storm is building, wind throwing sand against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. Bean pours himself another whiskey. His hands shake, not from fear. Roy Bean has never feared anything in his life, but from age, from exhaustion, from the knowledge that his time is running out. Legend says a cryptic telegram arrived days before his death. Old debts are coming due. No one's ever found it. Most likely it never existed. Bean knows what it means. Somewhere out there, someone remembers. Someone who lost money in one of his rigged trials. Someone whose brother or father he sentenced to hang. Someone who's been waiting years for revenge. And they're coming. Bean drinks. The storm grows louder. The lantern flickers. By sunrise, Judge Roy Bean, the self-proclaimed law west of the Pecos, the most famous frontier judge in American history, will be dead. But was it natural causes? Murder? Suicide? Nobody knows, because the story of Roy Bean's death is as murky, contradictory, and legendary as the man himself. This is his story. From outlaw to judge, from nobody to legend, from the Wild West to American folklore. And it begins not in Texas, but in Kentucky, with a boy who never learned to follow anyone's law but his own. Roy Bean was born around 1825 in Mason County, Kentucky. Nobody knows the exact date. Bean himself gave different birth years depending on who was asking. That should tell you everything you need to know about him. His family was poor but respectable. His father, Francis Bean, was a farmer. His mother raised a large brood of children in a log cabin near the Ohio River. Roy was one of several brothers, most of whom would go on to live unremarkable lives, but not Roy. By his teenage years, Roy Bean was already a problem. He drank. He fought. He gambled. He had no interest in farming, no patience for work, and no respect for authority. In 1847, at around 20 years old, Roy left Kentucky. He followed his older brother Sam to Mexico, where the U.S.-Mexico War was raging. Sam had opened a trading post in Chihuahua, selling supplies to both armies, a profitable and morally flexible business. Roy loved it. For the first time in his life, he was in a place where the rules didn't matter, where a man with quick hands, a sharp tongue, and no conscience could thrive. He worked in Sam's trading post. He gambled with soldiers. He smuggled goods across lines, and he learned Spanish, badly, but well enough to get by. When the war ended in 1848, Roy didn't go home. He drifted. New Mexico, California, the gold fields. He tried prospecting, bartending, running con games. He fought in saloons, got arrested more than once, and somewhere along the way, he killed a man. The details are murky. Bean told different versions of the story throughout his life. But the general outline is this. Roy got into a dispute with a Mexican official over a woman. There was a duel. Roy shot the man. And then he ran. He fled to San Diego, California, where his brother Sam had relocated. But trouble followed him. In San Diego, Roy got into another romantic entanglement, this time with the woman who was already spoken for. Her suitor challenged Roy to a duel. Roy accepted. They met at dawn, and Roy shot him too. This time, the man's friends came after Roy. They strung him up from a tree, a noose around his neck. But before they could finish the job, a woman, possibly the same woman Roy had been fighting over, cut the rope. Roy survived, barely. For the rest of his life, he wore high collars to hide the scar on his neck. By the 1850s, Roy Bean was drifting again. He tried running a butcher shop in San Diego. It failed. He tried saloon keeping in New Mexico. That failed too. He married a woman named Virginia Chavez in 1866, a respectable Mexican woman from a decent family. They had children. 4 of them survived to adulthood. But Roy was not a family man. He drank. He gambled. He disappeared for weeks at a time. Virginia stayed with him, but it couldn't have been easy. And then in the early 1880s, Roy Bean found his calling. He moved to West Texas, to the edge of the world, to a place so lawless, so violent, so desperate for any semblance of order that a man like Roy Bean, a con artist, a drunk, a killer, could become a judge. 1882. West Texas, the Southern Pacific Railroad is pushing through the desert, laying track toward El Paso. Along the route, construction camps spring up. Rough, filthy, violent places filled with laborers, gamblers, prostitutes, and outlaws. One of these camps sits near a place called Vinegaroon, later renamed Langtry. It's 100 miles from anything. No law, no sheriff, no courts, just desert, rattlesnakes, and men with guns. Roy Bean arrives with a tent, a barrel of whiskey, and an idea. He sets up a saloon, sells liquor to the railroad workers, and when disputes arise, over cards, over women, over money, Roy offers to settle them, for a fee, of course. At first it's informal. Roy just arbitrates, but then he gets bold. The county commissioners made him justice of the peace, then wish they hadn't. He hangs a sign, Judge Roy Bean, Notary Public, Justice of the Peace, Law west of the Pecos. It's absurd. Roy has no legal training, no authority whatsoever. But in West Texas in 1882, nobody cares. The nearest real court is 200 miles away, the nearest sheriff even farther. If someone commits a crime, theft, assault, murder, there's no one to handle it. So Roy steps in, and people accept it. Because the alternative is vigilante justice, or nothing at all. Roy's courtroom is his saloon. He calls it the Jersey Lilly, after the famous British actress Lillie Langtry, whom Roy admired from afar. He never met her, but he plastered her picture on the wall and bragged about his friendship with her for the rest of his life. The saloon itself is a ramshackle wooden building. 1 room, a bar, a few tables, and a wooden bench that serves as the judge's seat. Roy holds court whenever a case comes up. There's no schedule, no procedure, no lawyers, just Roy, a law book he barely understands, and a revolver on the bench. The trials are legendary. In one case, a man is accused of stealing a horse. Roy hears both sides, consults his law book, upside down according to some accounts, and declares, the defendant is guilty, but since he ain't got the horse no more, I sentence him to buy drinks for the house. In another case, a railroad worker falls off a bridge and dies. In his pocket, they find $40 and a revolver. Roy holds an inquest, determines the man died by accident, fines the corpse $40 for carrying a concealed weapon, and pockets the money. When someone complains, Roy says, it's the law, and I'm the law. Some of these stories are true. Some are exaggerated. Some are outright myths, but they all serve the same purpose. They make Roy Bean famous. Newspapers pick up the stories. Reporters travel to Langtry to interview the law west of the Pecos. Dime novels are written about him. and Roy, always a showman, leans into it. He starts staging elaborate trials for visitors, performs mock hangings, tells wild stories about gunfights and outlaws and frontier justice. Half of it is nonsense, but it entertains people, and it keeps the Jersey Lilly full. But beneath the folklore, there's a darker truth. Roy Bean was not a benevolent folk hero. He was a con artist who used his position to enrich himself. He fined people arbitrarily. He accepted bribes. He ruled in favor of whoever paid him the most, or whoever he liked better. And he was dangerous. In 1896, Roy organized an illegal prize fight on a sandbar in the Rio Grande, right on the Texas-Mexico border, so he could sell tickets and liquor without interference. When authorities tried to stop him, Roy threatened to shoot anyone who interfered. The fight went on. Roy made a fortune, and nobody arrested him, because out here, Roy Bean was untouchable. He was the law, and the law was whatever he said it was. So who was the real Roy Bean? That's the question historians have been wrestling with for over a century, because the mythology around Roy Bean is so thick, so contradictory, that separating fact from fiction is nearly impossible. Let's look at some of the most famous stories and ask, did they really happen? The Hanged Horse Thief. The story goes, a man is accused of stealing a horse. Roy finds him guilty and sentences him to hang. The man is strung up from a tree near the saloon. But before he dies, someone discovers the horse was never actually stolen. It had just wandered off. Roy, faced with his mistake, reportedly said, "Well, he's already hanged. Nothing I can do about it now." Did it happen? Probably not. There's no record of Roy Bean ever executing anyone. He had the authority to sentence people to hang, but there's no evidence he ever did. The story's almost certainly invented or heavily exaggerated. The corpse with the gun. This one is more plausible. A railroad worker dies in an accident. Roy holds an inquest and finds the dead man for carrying a concealed weapon, pocketing the $40 found on the body. Did it happen? Maybe. It's the kind of petty grift Roy would absolutely pull, but again, there's no official record. Just stories passed down through railroad workers and saloon patrons. The prize fight on the border. This one is true. In 1896, Roy organized a heavyweight championship fight between Bob Fitzsimmons and Peter Moyer. Boxing was illegal in Texas at the time, so Roy built a ring on a sandbar in the Rio Grande, technically outside U.S. jurisdiction. Hundreds of people showed up. Roy sold tickets, whiskey, and souvenirs. The fight lasted 95 seconds. Fitzsimmons knocked Moyer out cold, and Roy walked away with a small fortune. Authorities were furious, but they couldn't touch him, because technically, the fight hadn't happened in Texas, or Mexico, or anywhere with enforceable laws. It was vintage Roy Bean, the love letters to Lillie Langtry. Roy Bean worshipped the actress Lillie Langtry. He named his saloon after her. He hung her portrait on the wall, and he claimed repeatedly that they were friends, that she had visited, that she wrote him letters. None of it was true. Lillie Langtry never visited Langtry, Texas. She never wrote to Roy. She probably didn't even know he existed until after his death. But Roy told the story so often, so convincingly, that people believed it. And after Roy died, Langtry herself heard about him and found the whole thing charming. She visited Langtry, Texas in 1904, 1 year too late to meet Roy, and posed for photos in front of the Jersey Lilly. So even the lies became part of the legend. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Roy Bean was not a just man. He ruled arbitrarily. He took bribes. He favored friends and punished enemies. He had no legal training and made up laws as he went. But in a place with no law at all, Was Roy Bean better than nothing? Some say yes, that he provided a crude, imperfect form of order in a chaotic place, that he prevented lynchings by offering a barely legal alternative. Others say no, that he exploited his position for personal gain, that he was a tyrant who answered to no one. The truth? Probably both. Roy Bean was a con artist who stumbled into power and used it to enrich himself, but he was also a showman, a survivor, and against all odds, a stabilizing force in one of the wildest corners of the American frontier, and that's why we remember him. By the turn of the century, Roy Bean's world was changing. The railroad construction was finished, the workers moved on, the rough camps disappeared, and Langtry, once a bustling hub of vice and violence, became a quiet backwater. Fewer people came to the Jersey Lilly, fewer trials, fewer customers. Roy's income dried up. His family life was a mess. His wife, Virginia, stayed legally married but moved to San Antonio with most of the kids. Roy raised the two youngest in the back of the saloon. Roy had mistresses, local women, prostitutes, but no real companions. He was alone. His health was failing. He was overweight, diabetic, and drank constantly. He could barely walk without a cane, and his mind, once sharp, quick with a joke or a threat, was slowing, but he kept the saloon open, kept holding court, kept telling stories to whoever would listen, because without the Jersey Lilly, without the title of judge, Roy Bean was nothing. Just an old drunk in the desert, waiting to die. In early March 1903, Roy's health took a sharp turn. He was weak, confused, barely eating. Friends urged him to see a doctor. Roy refused. On March 16th, Roy spent the evening in the saloon. Some accounts say he was alone. Others say a few friends were with him. He drank. He may have played cards, and at some point, he went to bed in the back room of the saloon. Sometime during the night, Roy Bean died. When they found him in the morning, he was lying in his bed. No signs of violence, no evidence of foul play, just an old man, dead in his sleep. The official cause of death: heart failure. But almost immediately, rumors started. Some said Roy had been poisoned, that an old enemy had finally caught up with him, that the telegram warning of old debts had been real. Others said Roy had killed himself, that he couldn't bear the thought of becoming irrelevant, that he'd taken his own life rather than fade away. Still others said it was natural, that Roy had simply drunk and eaten himself to death. The truth? We'll never know. Roy Bean was buried in Del Rio, Texas, about 60 miles from Langtry. No grand funeral, no crowds, just a handful of people who remembered him. His grave is still there, a simple marker. It reads, Judge Roy Bean, Justice of the Peace, Law west of the Pecos. Roy Bean has been dead for over a century, but his legend only grew. Books were written about him, plays, movies. In 1940, a Hollywood film called The Westerner depicted Roy Bean as a lovable rogue played by Walter Brennan, who won an Oscar for the role. In 1972, Paul Newman played Roy in The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, a wildly fictionalized account that turned Roy into a tragic romantic figure. Neither film was historically accurate, but they cemented Roy Bean's place in American mythology. Today, the Jersey Lilly still stands in Langtry, Texas. It's a museum now. Tourists visit. They take photos. They buy souvenirs. They imagine what it must have been like when Roy held court with a whiskey bottle in one hand and a revolver in the other. And they ask, was he a hero or a villain? The answer is, he was neither. He was a con artist, a survivor, a man who seized an opportunity in a lawless place and made himself into something larger than life. Roy Bean didn't bring justice to West Texas. He brought theater, spectacle, a story people wanted to believe, and in a way that's more powerful than justice. Because justice fades, but legends endure. March 16th, 1903. The storm passes. The sun rises over the desert. Inside the Jersey Lilly, Roy Bean is dead. The lantern is burned out. The whiskey bottles are empty. The wanted posters curl in the dry air. Outside, the railroad tracks stretch east and west, toward cities Roy never saw, toward a future he wouldn't recognize. But his story, part truth, part myth, part pure Texas bravado, lives on. Judge Roy Bean, the law west of the Pecos, a man who made his own rules, told his own stories, and became legend by sheer force of personality. Was he a great man? No. Was he a just man? Absolutely not. But was he unforgettable? Yes. And in the end, maybe that's all that matters. This is Texas, and Texas remembers its rogues. If you want more stories from the wild edges of Texas history, the outlaws, the con artists, the legends who refuse to be forgotten, subscribe for more Texas tales, because the past isn't dead. It's still here, still dangerous, still telling us who we are.